My name is Nancy Hernandez, and my hands trembled as I held my father's last letter to me, but what my sister Elena didn't know was that I had 1/400 flight hours and nerves of steel. Tell me in the comments, have you ever been completely invisible in your own family? If this story hits home, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Every betrayal I share comes with a twist you won't see coming. If you've never been to a family funeral that feels more like a corporate takeover meeting, consider yourself lucky. My father, Miguel Hernandez, passed away 3 days ago in Lisbon. No tears, no long speeches, just a cold draft of air conditioning, a will being read over lukewarm hotel coffee, and my sister Elena holding court like a CEO on bonus day. She didn't even look at me when I walked into the room. That's how things have been since I enlisted. I wasn't the daughter with the law degree, the investment firm, or the penthouse in Manhattan. I was the one who wore boots and saluted for a living. Nancy, she said flatly, like she was reading my name off a grocery list. Didn't expect you to show up all the way from wherever you're stationed these days. Ramstein Air Base, I answered. She nodded like I'd just told her I work at a gas station. Then she turned back to the attorney, already checking something off on her legal pad. Probably my name off the asset distribution list. Dad's will was short, too short, suspiciously clean. Elena was listed as primary executor. She would manage all remaining real estate, investments, and family accounts. I got a sealed envelope and a thank you for my service. The envelope had a single post-it note stuck to it. Your father admired your discipline. He wanted you to have this. Inside was his old military challenge coin from the Korean War and a photo of him standing next to a fighter jet in 1975. That was it. No house, no savings, not even the watch he used to wear every day. To Elena, I was the decoration, a uniform at the funeral for optics. She even made a comment about it as we stood at the check-in counter in Lisbon airport. I hope you're not planning to wear that full getup on the flight home, she said, eyeing my dress uniform. It's my uniform, I replied. Sure, she smirked. And I suppose it comes with a little respect me button on the collar. If I weren't used to that tone, it might have stung. But I was. That's how it always was with her. Snide comments dressed as jokes, condescension sugar-coated in sisterly concern. We boarded our flight, Skybridge 372 to Denver with a layover in the Azores. Business class, not my choice. Elena booked it, said we had to fly together because it would look strange otherwise. She sat by the window, of course. I took the aisle. Between us, an empty seat. I figured even that much space wasn't enough to avoid her attitude, and I was right. You know, she said after takeoff, sipping her Chardonnay, Dad really wanted us to work together. I think he hoped you'd eventually grow out of the military thing and come home. I didn't know being stationed overseas was a personality flaw, I said. She gave a little laugh. It's just some people use the army to escape. Others use it to avoid growing up. That was her way of calling me a coward without actually saying the word. Classic Elena. I turned to the in-flight entertainment screen and scrolled through the movies. Not because I wanted to watch anything, but because I needed an excuse not to look at her. She went quiet for a bit. I thought that was it. Then she leaned in and dropped this one. You do know you're no longer in the will, right? I froze. She smiled, real slow. The mental health clause. It disqualifies beneficiaries with unresolved psychological records. I stared at her. What are you talking about? Oh, Nancy. She sighed dramatically. Remember that eval after Syria? The 3 months of mandatory leave? It's not personal. It's legal. That's when it clicked. She'd dug through my military records. She'd found my lowest moment and used it to push me out of my father's legacy. You leaked my evaluation? I asked quietly. I shared it with the estate attorney, she said. To protect the family's interests. You're still family, of course. That wasn't concern. That was calculated sabotage. Right then, I realized something. This flight was more than just a trip home. It was the final stage of a silent war my sister had been fighting against me for years. I just hadn't been paying attention, but I was now. She ordered another drink, called the flight attendant by her first name like they were old friends, and laughed at something on her phone. I stared out the window, not at the clouds, but past them. I wasn't angry. I was done being angry at Elena. I was calculating. There's a difference. I thought about Dad's coin, the fighter jet, his silence at the end. Maybe he knew. Maybe that coin wasn't a gift. It was a message. I slid it from my pocket and gripped it in my hand just as the seatbelt sign dinged. Somewhere over the Atlantic, at cruising altitude, with Elena smirking in seat 14A, the first turbulence hit. No one paid much attention at first. The first jolt made Elena spill her wine. She looked down, cursed under her breath, and pressed the call button with the kind of irritation only people used to getting their way can produce. I didn't flinch. Turbulence doesn't scare me. The flight attendant came over quickly, polite but clearly busy. "We're hitting a little bit of chop, ma'am. Would you like a napkin?" Elena didn't answer right away. She gave the woman a tight smile, then gestured toward her stained blouse, like she expected her to produce a dry cleaner on the spot. "Whatever you have, and maybe less bouncing next time." Growing up, Elena always got what she wanted. The bedroom with the better view, the car for her 16th birthday, the college fund that somehow never ran out. I got hand-me-downs and lectures about responsibility. When I was 14, Elena crashed Dad's Mercedes after a party. She'd been drinking, though she swore she hadn't. I found her crying in the driveway at 2 a.m, mascara running down her face, begging me to help her. I took the blame because she was already on thin ice with her grades. Told Dad I'd taken the car without permission, that I'd hit a mailbox trying to parallel park. He didn't believe me, but he couldn't prove otherwise. Dad grounded me for 3 months, took away my phone, my weekend privileges, made me work extra hours at his office filing paperwork. Elena never said thank you, never even acknowledged it. 2 weeks later, she was back to treating me like I didn't exist. When Mom got sick, I was the one who drove her to chemo appointments every Tuesday and Thursday for 18 months. I'd skip soccer practice, tell my friends I had family stuff. Elena was too busy with LSAT prep classes, networking events, building her resume. She sent flowers once, yellow roses. Mom hated yellow. I told her that. She said, "They were on sale." I never told anyone about those drives, about holding Mom's hand in the waiting room when the tremors got bad, about the way she'd apologize for being sick, like it was her fault, about cleaning up when the nausea hit in the car on the way home, pulling over on the side of the highway while she cried. Elena wrote the eulogy at the funeral. She talked about Mom's strength, her grace, her unconditional love. Everyone said it was beautiful. They didn't know Elena had barely visited the hospice, didn't know I was the one who stayed up those final nights, reading Mom her favorite poetry until she fell asleep. That's how it always worked. I did the heavy lifting, she took the credit, and somehow I was the one who ran away when I enlisted. The plane jolted again, harder this time. The lights dimmed slightly. Outside, the sun dipped behind a stretch of clouds that looked like burnt cotton. I shifted in my seat, tugged the edge of my jacket straight. Something felt off. Years in the air had trained me to spot patterns. How metal vibrates, how wind interacts with fuselage, the frequency of engine noise, the way hydraulic systems respond to pressure changes. This wasn't routine. In my years flying combat missions, I'd learned to trust my gut before my instruments. That split-second instinct that told you something was wrong before the alarm started blaring. It had saved my life more than once. Right now, every nerve in my body was screaming that this wasn't just turbulence. The engine pitch was off, too high on the right side, struggling to compensate. The airframe was vibrating at the wrong frequency. And that smell, faint but unmistakable, was getting stronger. I'd smelled burning wiring before. In a trainer jet over the Nevada desert when I was 23, the instructor had 2 seconds to decide whether to punch out or try to land it. He chose to land. Barely made it. This smelled the same. Elena pulled out her iPad, opened an email with bold red letters, and tilted it just enough for me to see without actually handing it over. "Got final confirmation from the trust attorney," she said. "It's done. I'm assuming you won't contest?" I didn't respond. She continued like she was leading a board meeting. "The Valence Trust is being folded into my firm. I'll manage it for now. Unless, of course, you've got experience with managing multi-state asset portfolios while flying jets over conflict zones." I turned to face her fully. "You actually think you're the only one in this family who understands structure?" She smirked. "I think I'm the only one who didn't abandon it." That one stung, but I didn't let her see it. Elena always made it sound like I ran away from home at 18 and never looked back, which is almost true, except she never asks why. She doesn't remember the night Dad yelled at her for messing with the estate accounts when she was 23, She'd been siphoning small amounts, nothing major, just enough to cover her lifestyle while she was job hunting. Dad caught her. He was furious, threatened to cut her off completely. I stepped in, told him it was me, that I'd been confused about the family finances, thought I was authorized. It was a weak lie, but Dad believed it because it fit his narrative. Nancy the screw-up, Elena the golden child. She doesn't remember the hours I spent at Mom's bedside while she sat in exam rooms pretending none of us existed. Or the time I found her sobbing in her car outside the hospital because she couldn't handle seeing Mom hooked up to machines. I told her to go home, told her I'd handle it, and I did. She doesn't remember because she doesn't want to, because remembering would mean acknowledging that I gave up pieces of myself to protect her, over and over again, and she repaid me by erasing me from our father's will. The plane cut through a narrow cloud bank. The seatbelt light blinked on again, and the captain's voice came over the speaker. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've hit a bit of turbulence. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened." Elena gave a theatrical sigh. You'd think a first-class flight could afford a smoother ride. I ignored her. Across the aisle, a man in his 40s wearing a Denver Nuggets hoodie looked pale. His hands clenched the armrests. Next to him, his teenage daughter was quietly crying into a travel pillow. Nerves. Understandable. What wasn't understandable was how people like Elena could coast through life thinking everything should bend to them. "Does this kind of thing happen a lot?" she asked, glancing at me like I was an airline employee. "Turbulence?" "Yes," I said. "Your attitude?" "Also yes." She rolled her eyes. "You're in a mood. I'm in a cabin with you. There's a difference." She opened her mouth to respond, then stopped. Another jolt rocked the plane, this time hard enough to shift the overhead bins. A few clicks and slams followed. Someone yelped further back. A baby started to cry. The flight attendants began walking faster, checking belts, calming passengers. Elena suddenly looked less smug. "I swear," she muttered, "if this becomes a thing..." It already was a thing. The engines whined, then dipped, then recalibrated. Not normal. I glanced toward the cockpit. No movement. A sharp bang echoed from the tail section, followed by what sounded like a mechanical hiccup. People gasped. The cabin lights flickered once. That's when I felt it in my gut. We weren't dealing with a bumpy ride. The smell of burnt plastic was faint at first, just enough to make you wonder if it was in your head. Elena wrinkled her nose and looked around like someone had dared to use an aerosol in her presence. I knew that smell. Wiring, possibly a short, possibly worse. A soft chime rang out overhead. Then silence. No announcements, no crew moving, just that hum of every passenger realizing at the same time that something wasn't quite right. Elena finally turned to me. "Should they be saying something?" I didn't answer. My brain was already running checklists. The tone shift in the engine, the vibration changes, that faint chemical smell. None of it added up to routine turbulence. Then came the whine, a pitch shift in the right engine, high, drawn out, mechanical. And then a sudden pop. Not a loud explosion, but a sharp gut-punching sound that made the whole cabin flinch. The lights dimmed again. This time, they didn't come back on immediately. A baby started screaming. A few passengers gasped or cursed. Then came the voices from the back. "Did you hear that? What was that? Is that normal?" Spoiler, it wasn't. I leaned forward slightly, trying to see toward the cockpit. No crew, no announcements, nothing. Elena was pale now, her bravado cracking at the edges. "I don't like this," she muttered. That's when a man 2 rows ahead stood up, turning to face the cabin crew. "Excuse me, is everything all right? Something's wrong with the engine." The flight attendant tried to calm him, asking him to remain seated. He didn't look convinced. Neither was I. Then Elena whispered the line that still echoes in my skull. "This is exactly why I don't trust flying with amateurs." I turned to her. "What?" She shrugged, pulling her designer shawl tighter. "Budget airlines, ex-military pilots who think combat hours are the same as passenger flights. It's all just for show." I stared at her. She glanced at my face and smirked. "No offense. I mean, you're technically one of them, aren't you? A toy soldier with a joystick. Only difference is your targets don't shoot back." "You think being a combat pilot is a game?" She waved a hand. "I think it's theatrical. You didn't choose military life. You ran to it because you couldn't win at real life. so you put on a uniform and let other people tell you what to do. Every word came with that same bitter flavor, like she was chewing old envy and trying to spit it at me. The plane dipped slightly, not sharply, but enough for every stomach to drop just a little. People started whispering louder. The man in the Nuggets hoodie was openly praying now. Then, finally, the intercom clicked on. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your first officer speaking. We're experiencing a minor technical issue with one of our engines. We are currently assessing the situation and will provide more information shortly. Please remain calm and seated with your seatbelts fastened. Elena scoffed. Minor technical issue. Did they train that line at the same place they teach you to salute? I turned to her. Do you ever stop? Stop what? Talking down to people who actually do something real. She looked surprised. You think flying planes makes you better than me? No. I think you never got over the fact that I never needed your approval. Her lips tightened, but she didn't respond. Probably the first moment of silence from her since the gate. Another jolt. Harder this time. The plane tilted slightly left. Not a normal bank. A correction. Then I heard something I hadn't expected. A choked cough through the intercom. Then silence. The emergency lighting kicked on. And in that half-second of power flicker, I saw the expression on Elena's face change. The arrogance was gone, the confidence drained. She looked like everyone else, scared. And I was already unbuckling my seatbelt. A sudden jolt threw coffee cups from the tray tables. The entire cabin lurched downward, and for a moment, gravity felt like it had a grudge. Shouts and gasps mixed into a low cacophony. Masks dropped. Oxygen hissed. I caught sight of the man in the Nuggets hoodie gripping his daughter's hand until his knuckles went white. The flight attendant's practiced calm evaporated. She grabbed the intercom microphone. Mayday, Mayday, Engine 2, fire. Crew to cockpit. Her voice quivered on the last word. Elena's eyes went wide. That doesn't sound minor. On the overhead panel, the ECAM lights flickered red. I recognized the codes. Fire in 2. Overhead hydraulic fail. None of it was good. By the time I processed what they meant, the plane tilted again. Hard, a sharp explosion echoed from the right wing. A whoosh of hot air flooded through the cabin vents, carrying burnt metal and frustration. Someone screamed. I stood up. The flight attendant turned toward me, eyes pleading. Please, can you help? I nodded. Show me the way. She led me through the chaos. Drinks sloshed off carts. A child vomited quietly in an aisle seat. Passengers held onto overhead bins. I reached the cockpit door and knocked. No answer. I tried the handle. It was unlocked. I stepped inside. The scene hit me like a wave. Warning horns blared. Panels glowed crimson. The captain was slumped over the controls, his mask dangling at an odd angle. The co-pilot was still upright but pressed against the sidewall, one hand on the yoke, the other clutching his throat. He looked up at me, fear flashing in his eyes. I can't clear it. The fires spread, systems fried. I moved to the secondary yoke. Stand back! He scrambled away. I pulled on the mask, clipped it to my harness. The captain twitched. I tapped his shoulder. You okay? He shook his head, eyes unfocused. The co-pilot pointed at the checklist printer. Engine out procedure. I grabbed the printout, skimmed code names. Hydraulic bypass. Manual gear deployment. Alternate trim switch. My military training clicked in. Each step rehearsed. I knew by heart. Elena stumbled in behind me, clutching the door frame. What are you doing here? I ignored her. I didn't have time for family therapy. The plane was banking left, altitude dropping. I could feel the nose dipping below the horizon. Instruments flashed warnings. Nancy, do something, she whispered. Her tone had shifted from smug to desperate. I flipped the selector switch to manual hydraulics. The yoke stiffened. I braced myself, pressed forward gently, then eased back. The engines snarled in protest, but the bank lessened. I read the altitude, 32,000 feet and falling fast. I keyed the push to talk. Mayday, this is Skybridge 3072. Engine 2 fire. Captain incapacitated. Request priority vector to nearest diversion airfield. My voice cut through static. Silence, then a crackle. Skybridge, this is Madrid Center. McLaren Airstrip is 150 miles southwest. Approved glide approach. Confirm altitude and heading. I repeated the numbers and switched channels. Elena leaned in close. Are we going to die? I turned to her. Not on my watch. She blinked. You're serious about this, aren't you? I didn't indulge her. I returned to the controls. The co-pilot's face was pale. I offered him a nod. He stumbled out and helped the flight attendant secure loose items. I glanced down at the passengers. They were a mess. Pale faces, trembling hands. But they were still breathing. The plane was quieter now, the whining engines replaced by the hum of life support. I adjusted the trim manually, felt the cabin shift, checked heading, checked glide ratio. I visualized the runway. 6,100 feet of concrete in the middle of scrubland. No room for error. Behind me, the cockpit door slammed shut as Elena tried to follow. You have no right, she barked. You weren't even supposed to be in that cockpit. There are laws, protocols. I kept my hands steady on the yoke. There are also 300 people alive, which is more than you've ever saved from anything. Her mouth opened, then closed again. The co-pilot, his name tag said Stokes, slid back into his seat. You ever landed a bird this size? He asked. No, I said honestly. But I've landed fighters missing wings, power, and part of a tail. He grunted. Fair trade. I leveled us off at 14,000 feet, then banked east-northeast. McLaren was 37 miles out and barely visible on radar. I opened the secondary comms channel and hailed their tower. McLaren Tower, this is Skybridge 3072. Aircraft is Boeing 757 with partial engine failure. Captain unresponsive. Alternate pilot in command. Request emergency landing clearance. There was a pause, then. Skybridge 3072. This is McLaren. You are cleared. Emergency crews standing by. Winds variable 7 knots. Runway 17 is lit and cleared. Be advised, field length is not rated for your class of aircraft. Understood, I replied. We'll make it fit. Stokes blinked, then snorted. You always talk like that? I grinned. Only when I'm pretending I'm not freaking out. We started the approach. Speed 230 knots. Altitude 10,500 feet. Fuel still too heavy but manageable. Cabin pressure holding. Passengers silent. The runway came into sight. Barely. A thin gray line cut through pine trees and fog. The kind of landing zone you'd never aim for unless the alternative was worse. Gear down, I called. Stokes hit the switch. The landing gear groaned, hesitated, then locked. I kept one hand on the throttle, the other on the yoke. Every tiny vibration told a story, and I listened to all of them. We dropped to 5,000 feet. Still too fast. I eased back the power again, letting gravity do its job. The engines coughed. The plane wobbled. But it held. We might not stop in time, Stokes said quietly. We will, I said. He didn't argue. The windshield was streaked with mist now. Ground proximity warnings pinged like anxious birds. The cockpit lit up with caution lights, none of which told us anything we didn't already know. As we crossed 1,500 feet, I glanced once at the dead captain, still slumped in his chair, oxygen mask askew, face pale as parchment. I'll call it, Stokes said. No, I said. Let me. I adjusted the trim again. The plane didn't respond the way it should have. Too heavy, too slow to bleed altitude, too much drag, and one good engine working overtime. We're still hot, Stokes double-checked the speed. I know, I said. I'm trying to hold flare range without stalling. The ground was rushing up now, way too close for comfort. The approach angle was ugly. We were barely clearing a line of fir trees that looked way too tall for a field this size. I tapped the rudder and dipped us just slightly left. The landing gear creaked. The stick vibrated in my hands. I've flown in combat zones with missile lock on my tail. I've made carrier landings in the rain with half a cockpit. But this was different. There's no bailout option in a 777 full of civilians. No ejection seat, no do-overs. This was either going to work or become a crater on the evening news. Flaps full, I said. Stokes flipped the switch. We're losing lift. Good, I muttered. We need drag more than we need glide. The runway was in full view now. It looked like a driveway. We need full reverse thrust and max braking the second we hit, Stokes said. We've got maybe 5 seconds of margin before we overshoot. Noted, I said. Brace for impact call. Do it. I reached for the PA and hit the switch. This is the flight deck. Brace, repeat. Brace for impact. Behind the cockpit, I could hear the ripple of movement as 300 people curled into the crash position. Elena's face flashed through my mind for half a second. I pictured her bracing against the seat, clutching her purse like it could buy her way out of gravity. Then I shut the thought down. We were below 800 feet. Speed still high, Stokes muttered. I'm aware. Any ideas? 1. Terrifying. Do it. I pitched the nose slightly higher, riding the air like a stubborn wave. The wind shear bucked us hard, jolting the fuselage, but I kept the angle. The computer screamed at me. Stall imminent. I ignored it. At 300 feet, I cut throttle on the live engine. Full idle, no thrust. You just killed the engine, Stokes said, alarm rising in his voice. I just forced glide mode, I corrected. If we flare too hard on power, we bounce. If we bounce, we lose roll control. If we lose roll control, we cartwheel. He stared. You're insane. Yep. The ground screamed toward us, altimeter ticking down like a bomb. 100 feet, 50, 30. Hold, I whispered. Wheels touched, slammed. The cabin jolted like we'd hit a wall. The tail slammed down hard, but didn't drag. The tires screamed. I pulled back hard on the yoke, while Stokes yanked the reverse thrust toggles. One engine gave us drag, the other gave us smoke. The brakes kicked in, jerking us forward. We were eating runway like a starving dog. Trees at the end were getting too big. Too close. Still fast, Stokes shouted. Keep it down, I snapped. We're not done, I held the yoke steady as the end of the runway loomed up fast. No shoulder, no extra pad. Just a gravel edge and a wall of trees. We were still doing 70 knots. I locked my jaw and kept the plane dead center. We hit a bump. The left side dipped. The right gear squealed. Then we slowed. Hard. Stokes hit the brake assist, and the plane finally came to a full stop. Just a few feet before the edge. Silence. Pure electric silence. No more engine noise, no alarms, just breathing. Lots of it. Heavy, unfiltered relief from 300 human lungs. Then the cabin erupted. Some people sobbing, others shouting, but most just stunned, like they hadn't processed what just happened. I looked over at Stokes. His face was white, hands trembling. He blinked twice, then laughed once. Loud and sharp. You actually did it. I didn't answer. My hands were still gripping the controls. He reached out and gently peeled them off. Outside the windshield, the emergency crews were sprinting down the tarmac. Lights flashing. Fire suppression vehicles, EMTs, local law enforcement. I sat back and exhaled. Finally. The cockpit door opened slowly. A flight attendant peeked in, face pale. Is it over? Landing's done, I said. Rescue's yours. She nodded, teary-eyed. As she left, Stokes gave me a sideways glance. You ever consider commercial aviation? I shook my head. Not dramatic enough. I pulled off the headset, finally aware of how loud everything had been. Inside the cockpit, it was dead quiet now. The kind of quiet that doesn't feel peaceful, just paused. Then the first scream came from somewhere in the back. A sharp, high-pitched burst that didn't sound like fear anymore. It sounded like release. More followed. Voices crying, cheering. Some clapped. Others sobbed uncontrollably. One guy in row 6 stood up and shouted, "We're alive! We freaking made it!" I stepped into the cabin. Every head turned. Some people clapped instinctively. Others looked confused, still processing what had just happened. Elena stood up slowly in 14A, her face unreadable. She looked around like someone had played a trick on her. You? She asked, loud enough for half the cabin to hear. You actually did it? I didn't stop walking. Yes, I did. I checked the passengers along the aisle. Some had cuts from flying luggage. A woman in her 60s had a gash on her forehead, but she was smiling through tears. An elderly man clutched a rosary, lips moving in silent prayer. Others just looked dazed, like their brains were still catching up to their bodies. The guy in the Nuggets hoodie from earlier made eye contact with me. His face was streaked with tears he wasn't bothering to hide. He gave a slow, sincere nod. No words, just pure, unfiltered gratitude. The teenager beside him whispered, "Thank you," and held her dad's hand like she didn't plan to let go anytime soon. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but clear, alive. A middle-aged woman in a business suit grabbed my arm as I passed. "I have 3 kids at home," she said, her voice breaking. 3 kids, You gave me back to them. I squeezed her hand. Didn't trust myself to speak. Further back, a young couple was holding each other, foreheads pressed together. The man's shoulders were shaking. The woman was whispering something I couldn't hear. A flight attendant was helping a passenger with a bloody nose. She looked up at me, her own eyes wet. Mouthed the words, "Thank you." This was why I flew. Not for medals or recognition. For this. For people getting to go home. Outside, fire trucks were circling. One had already parked by the left wing. Men in yellow suits jogged out, unspooling hoses. The rear emergency door opened. A hiss of pressure, then air. Cold, damp Newfoundland air. Passengers started moving, slow and shaky. The crew guided them, trying to count heads, check for injuries, direct people down the inflatable slides. Someone pulled out their phone and pointed it at me. I turned my head before they could hit record. Elena caught up to me near the front galley, her heels clicking unevenly against the metal floor. "You had no right," she snapped. "You weren't even supposed to be in that cockpit. There are laws, protocols." "There are also 300 people alive," I replied, "which is more than you've ever saved from anything." Her mouth opened, then closed again. For once, she had no comeback. A little boy in a NASA t-shirt walked by, holding his mom's hand. He looked up at me and whispered, "Are you a real pilot?" I crouched down. "The realest kind, Mike." He gave me a thumbs up. So sincere it actually hurt a little. By the time I stepped off the plane and hit the tarmac, my legs felt like someone else's. I looked back once, just once. The jet sat like a wounded animal, one engine still smoking. One wing dipped lower than it should have been. But it was upright, intact, full of people who were never supposed to walk away from this. A paramedic handed me a blanket. I didn't need it, but I took it anyway. The field was chaos, flashing lights, EMTs checking passengers, local media swarming past the security perimeter. Someone tried to shove a microphone in my face. I turned away. Elena wasn't far behind. She stepped down the mobile stairs like she expected applause. None came. She walked over, fixing her hair, trying to reassemble her image. "What are you going to do now?" she asked coldly. "Start taking credit?" "I'm going to make sure everyone gets medical clearance," I said. "Then I'm getting on a call with Air Force Command." "Of course," she said. "Run back to your toys." I looked at her. "You know," I said calmly, "you called me a toy soldier." She crossed her arms. "Because you are." "Then it's a hell of a thing," I said, "that a toy just saved your life." She stared at me like I'd slapped her. Then she turned and walked away. I didn't follow. The news van showed up before the adrenaline wore off. I was sitting on the tarmac with the space blanket still wrapped around my shoulders when the first lens turned in my direction. They didn't ask questions right away. They didn't need to. The image was enough. That didn't stop the headlines from writing themselves. Mystery woman lands passenger jet after captain collapses. Pilot in seat 14. Who is she? Combat veteran pulls off impossible landing. By the next morning, 3 talk shows had picked up the story. The angle varied depending on which network you watched. Veteran hero saves, flight after engine failure. Unqualified soldier hijacks plane mid-air. Pilot or liability, the Nancy Hernandez dilemma. The last one stung. But it was the viral video that changed everything. Someone had filmed Elena during the flight, right after the intercom announcement, when I took the cockpit. Her voice rang out clear as day, sneering. "She's not even a real pilot. She's a toy soldier playing dress-up." The comments weren't kind. Thousands of replies, all ripping her apart. People demanding her name, calling her a coward, a snob. Worse, for the first time in 20 years, the world saw Elena the way I always had. Sharp, smug, and just a little too cruel. I put the phone down and stared at the ceiling. I didn't feel proud. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt quiet. By morning, Air Force liaison officers had arrived. So did corporate reps from the airline. They said a lot of words like protocol, liability, unprecedented situation. What they didn't say was thank you. Didn't matter. I wasn't there for thanks. I was there to make sure no one spun this story into a disaster that didn't happen. I gave my formal report, walked them through every second from engine loss to touchdown. They asked if I'd been cleared to assume control. I was qualified, I said. That wasn't the question. I didn't ask for permission, I replied. I saved lives. They wrote that down. Elena didn't say a word during the entire debrief. She sat at the far end of the room, arms folded, legs crossed, jaw locked. I could feel her staring at me the whole time. When it ended, I walked past her without looking. She didn't move. 2 days after the landing, I was sitting in temporary Air Force housing near the base in Gander, sipping lukewarm coffee and reviewing my own statement, when the official notice landed in my inbox. Subject: Incident Inquiry, Unauthorized Assumption of Flight Controls Civilian Aircraft. Below it, a long string of agency names: FAA, NTSB, JAG. Even the damn TSA had something to say. I closed the laptop slowly, set my mug down, and exhaled through my nose. So this was how it was going to go. No medal, no handshake, no banner, just forms, hearings, and doubts dressed up like protocol. I wasn't surprised. This wasn't the first time a woman in uniform had done something extraordinary and been met with suspicion instead of respect. But it still hit harder than I wanted to admit. I'd saved 300 lives, and now I had to defend myself for doing it. I thought about the passenger letters that had already started arriving, handwritten notes on hotel stationery, emails with subject lines like, "You are my hero," and "Thank you for bringing me home," photos of reunited families, videos of children who still had their parents because I didn't freeze in that cockpit. But none of that mattered to the bureaucracy. All they saw was a protocol violation, a woman who stepped outside her lane. The irony wasn't lost on me. If I'd been a male military pilot, they'd probably be planning a press conference. But because I was Captain Nancy Hernandez, they were planning an investigation. I grabbed my phone and scrolled through the messages. One from my squadron commander: "Stay strong, we've got your back." Another from a fellow pilot I'd trained with: "They're going to try to make an example out of you. Don't let them." And then one from a number I didn't recognize: "You saved my daughter's life. Whatever they throw at you, know that you're a hero to our family. David Chen, Seat 22C." I set the phone down and stared at the wall. Whatever came next, I'd face it the same way I faced that landing, head on. No apologies. Across the room, a knock on the door. A young Air Force lieutenant stepped in. "Captain Hernandez?" "Yeah. You're requested at the base conference room in 15 minutes. Air Mobility Command and FAA have joined the call. Legal team will be present." I stood. "Anyone from Public Affairs?" "Yes, ma'am, and someone from Civilian Relations. They want to talk about messaging." Of course they do. 15 minutes later, I was in a fluorescent-lit room with 5 people in uniform, 3 civilians in suits, and a video screen full of government faces. They asked questions for an hour. Why did I enter the cockpit? Did I know the captain was incapacitated? Had I received permission from the airline? Was I emotionally stable during the incident? Was there any history of PTSD, impulse issues, disciplinary flags? I answered everything directly, calmly, with no apologies. One woman from the FAA leaned forward. "Why didn't you wait for ground instruction? Why assume command without clearance from airline operations?" "Because airline ops weren't on the plane," I said. "But 300 people were." They didn't like that answer. Across the room, the Air Force liaison cleared his throat. "With respect, Captain Hernandez's actions align with Article 5 of the Emergency Authority Clause under DoD Field Directive 17A. In the absence of functioning chain of command, she responded under duty to protect life, property, and safety." The civilian in the gray blazer frowned. "She still superseded airline authority. She also prevented a catastrophic loss of life," the liaison replied flatly. The room stayed quiet for a long time. After the call ended, a man from the airline's legal team approached me privately in the hallway. "You've made us very nervous," he said. I raised an eyebrow. "Nervous like lawsuits, nervous like headlines. There's footage of your sister insulting you mid-flight. It's viral. I've seen it. She's a known figure," he added. "Big investment circles, high profile. A public scandal could cause damage to both sides." "You mean to her reputation?" He didn't answer, just gave a weak corporate smile and said, "We're hoping this can resolve quietly." It wouldn't, not anymore. But while they were worried about headlines, my lawyer was digging deeper. He contacted me 2 days later with documents in hand. Everything I suspected was true, and worse. Elena hadn't just manipulated Dad's legal decisions in his final year. She'd restructured the family holdings through a proxy firm, Carrick Trust Management, buried under 6 shell companies, my name removed, scrubbed, replaced with language that declared me mentally unstable, unfit to manage assets, and a risk to fiduciary continuity. Where'd she get that language? I asked. My lawyer scrolled. Here's the kicker. This clause was added 4 years ago. Same month your Air Force file flagged that concussion from the G-Force incident during training. I blinked. That was minor. I passed all post-flight evals. She got hold of the unredacted medical report, spun it as evidence of psychological impairment, then used it to quietly remove you from decision-making power. I swallowed hard. Dad signed off on it? Technically, yes, but the notary's signature? Fake. It was digitally stamped by someone no longer licensed in the state of Virginia. It was all there in black and white. My own sister had used a training injury and forged documents to erase me from the family legacy. Can we take this public? I asked. We can do better, he said. We can subpoena her. News hit the next week. Elena Hernandez, majority board member of Hallberg Financial, under federal review. Words like fraudulent inheritance maneuvering and strategic psychological discrediting made their way into the press. For once, she had nothing to say. The board meeting happened without me, but I heard about it from my lawyer. Elena sat at that long mahogany table surrounded by men in suits who'd once called her brilliant. Now they were calling her a liability. The forensic accountant walked them through every transaction, every shell company, every forged signature, the metadata trail that led directly to her office computer, the timeline showing she'd been systematically removing me from our father's estate for 4 years. One board member asked her directly, "Did you or did you not use falsified medical documentation to manipulate estate distribution?" She didn't answer. Her lawyer advised her to invoke the Fifth Amendment. By the end of the session, Hallberg Financial had drafted a separation agreement. They gave her 72 hours to sign it or face termination for cause. She signed. Her name disappeared from the executive page by Friday. The penthouse she'd bragged about, liquidated to cover legal fees. The investment portfolio she'd built her reputation on, frozen pending investigation. The fall wasn't public or dramatic. There were no handcuffs, no perp walk. Just a quiet dismantling of everything she'd built on lies. Meanwhile, the airline sent me a formal letter of commendation. The passengers started a petition demanding I receive recognition. News outlets were calling me for interviews. I declined them all. This wasn't about fame. It was about knowing I'd done the right thing when it mattered most. At the same time, the FAA and Department of Defense released a joint report on the flight incident. Conclusion: Captain Nancy Hernandez acted within reasonable emergency authority. No violation of aviation law occurred. It was over. Officially, no charges, no censure, no apology either, but I never expected one. I was reinstated on active flight duty. But something had changed in me. I wasn't angry anymore. Not the way I used to be. I was focused. I requested a reassignment, advisory role, pilot mentorship, outreach for women in aviation. The Air Force granted it within a week. 2 days later, I got a letter, not an email. A real folded envelope with cream stock and blue ink. It was from one of the passengers, a woman named Trish, mother of 3, seat 28D. She wrote, "My youngest had just turned 5. We were flying back from our first family vacation in years. If you hadn't taken that yoke, none of us would have made it. You didn't just land a plane, you saved a family." I put the letter on my desk and didn't touch it for a long time. I didn't cry. I just sat there and let the silence settle. Not the silence of trauma, the silence of something over, something clean. 2 weeks later, Elena showed up. She stood in front of the bulletin board at the base office, arms folded, phone off for once. No entourage, no makeup team, just her, raw, tired, exposed. She turned as I walked in. "I figured you'd be gone by now," she said. "Not quite. I heard you're taking the advisory post." I said nothing. She nodded slowly. "That's good. You're good at training. Focused. Predictable." I didn't reply. She glanced at the floor, then back up. "So this is what you wanted. Revenge?" I walked past her, picked up my flight binder, slid it into my duffel, then zipped it shut. When I turned around, I looked her dead in the eye. I wanted my name cleared, my father's trust restored, and 300 people alive. "That's not revenge. That's responsibility." She flinched, Just barely, but it was real. You humiliated me, she said, her voice brittle. No, I said. You did that yourself, I just stopped covering for it. She opened her mouth, then closed it. The silence between us stretched, heavy with every unspoken decade of our lives. She reached into her bag and handed me a small envelope. No name, no logo. Just thick ivory paper. I didn't open it. Is this your version of an apology? It's a withdrawal, she said. From the estate. From the trust. I'm signing over my shares. I didn't say thank you. I didn't need to. You'll do what you want with it, she added. I assume something noble. You assume correctly. She gave a tight smile. The kind of smile people practice in boardrooms. The kind that never touches the eyes. I'll be in Europe for a while, she said. Cleaning up the mess. I nodded. Seems like a full-time job. She laughed. Short, bitter. Then, almost involuntarily, she said, I didn't think you'd land it. I know. She stared at me for a long second. I don't hate you, she said. I'm not here for your forgiveness, I replied. She stepped past me. No handshake, no embrace, no final word. And that, I realized, was the apology. Not because she said it, but because she didn't. 2 weeks later, I stood on a tarmac in Arizona, watching a dozen young women step out of a shuttle van. Their faces were nervous, excited, curious. They didn't know they were my first class. The patch on their bags read, Windflight Institute, Women in Air Leadership, funded entirely by my half of the estate. Each one of them had been selected from underrepresented communities, first-generation students, veterans transitioning to civilian careers, women who'd been told no more times than they could count. Maria Alvarez from East LA, daughter of immigrants, first in her family to finish high school. She'd scored in the 99th percentile on her aptitude tests, but couldn't afford flight school. Keisha Thompson from Detroit, former Army mechanic who'd spent 6 years keeping helicopters in the air, but was told she didn't have the right background for pilot training. Sarah Chen from rural Montana, raised on a ranch, who'd been flying crop dusters since she was 16, but never had access to proper certification. Aisha Patel from New Jersey, whose parents wanted her to be a doctor, who'd been sneaking flying lessons on weekends and working 3 jobs to pay for them. Every single one of them had a story. Every single one of them had been underestimated, just like me. One stepped up and saluted. Ma'am, Cadet Alvarez reporting. I returned the salute. Welcome to the sky. She grinned, eyes shining. Thank you for this opportunity, ma'am. You have no idea what this means to me. I looked at her, really looked at her, saw the determination, the hunger, the fear of failure mixed with the refusal to quit. Actually, I said, I know exactly what it means. That night, I sat alone on the airfield's training deck, watching the sun burn down behind the runway. My phone buzzed. A message from one of the passengers. It was a photo of her and her daughter standing in front of a new house. The caption read, Alive because of you. I didn't reply. I just stared at the photo and let the silence speak for me. No press conference, no interview, no viral moment, just truth and peace. One of the girls stalled on her first takeoff. The nose pitched up too hard, and the trainer plane wobbled awkwardly above the tarmac, engine whining like it was begging for stability. I watched from the control tower, headset on, eyes narrowed. Cadet, ease your grip. You're flying, not fighting it, I said calmly over the radio. There was a pause. Then her voice came back, tight and shaky. Copy that. She adjusted. The plane leveled. A second later, the gear lifted off clean. And just like that, another one flew. Behind me, one of the instructors whistled low. You think she'll stick with it? If she doesn't, I said, it won't be because someone told her she couldn't. The Windflight Institute was 6 weeks into its first training rotation. 15 cadets. 13 of them had never even touched a real yoke before this program. Now they were banking turns over the desert like they'd been born in the cockpit. And for the first time in years, I wasn't fighting. I wasn't proving anything. I was building. The hangar bore no family name but mine. Not because I needed credit, but because I'd earned the right to put something clean into the world that wasn't stained by Elena's shadow or Dad's legacy or courtrooms or viral videos. Just a name, a direction. One morning, I was reviewing engine logs in the briefing room when the receptionist tapped my shoulder. There's someone here for you, she said. I looked up expecting a donor or recruiter, but instead I saw a teenage girl, barely 18, standing stiff in the doorway, arms at her side, eyes flicking between pride and fear. She was holding an application packet. "I'm sorry," she said, voice barely above a whisper. I wasn't sure if I should, but I didn't know who else to ask. I looked at the name on the top of the folder, Morgan Hernandez, Elena's daughter. She stepped forward. "I want to earn it, not because of my last name, not because of her, because I want to fly." I studied her for a long moment. Same cheekbones, same stubborn chin. But the eyes, those were different, not entitled, not rehearsed, just raw. "What did your mom say about this?" I asked. "She said she wouldn't stop me," Morgan replied. "But she also wouldn't support me. Said if I came here, I'd be on my own." "That true?" "She cut me off 2 weeks ago." Morgan's voice didn't waver, but I could see the hurt beneath the brave face. "Froze my credit cards, changed the locks on the apartment. Had her lawyer send me a letter saying I was no longer a dependent." I set down the application. "Why?" "Because I told her I wanted to be like you instead of like her." Morgan met my eyes. "Because I said that saving 300 lives meant more than managing $300 million. Because I told her that you were the only Hernandez who actually stood for something." That must have gone over well. She threw a crystal vase at me. Hermes, probably worth more than my first year's tuition here. A ghost of a smile crossed Morgan's face, but it didn't reach her eyes. She said I was ungrateful, that she'd given me everything and I was throwing it away to play soldier. Her exact words. I knew those words, had heard variations of them my whole life. "Where are you staying?" I asked. "Youth hostel in Phoenix. I've been working breakfast shift at a diner to cover rent. Saved up enough for about 3 months if I'm careful." This kid had walked away from everything, money, family, security, to chase a dream that most people would call impractical. Reminded me of someone. "That true?" "She cut me off 2 weeks ago." "Why come here?" She took a breath. "Because you're the only person in this family who earned what they have." That stopped me cold. I walked to the desk and took her application, scanned it. GPA solid, ASVAB scores clean, motivation letter honest. She had the background, the drive, and the guts to walk in here alone. I pulled out a training schedule and started filling in her name. Institute provides housing for accepted cadets. You'll bunk with the other first years. Meals are included, flight suits, equipment, everything you need. Morgan's eyes widened. I can't afford. "It's covered," I said. "Part of the program. The only thing you need to pay for is your commitment. Show up, work hard, don't quit." She nodded, blinking rapidly. I handed her the schedule. "Orientation starts next month. If you make it through the first phase, you'll earn your wings, but no shortcuts." She smiled, a little too wide. Wouldn't expect any. She turned to go, then hesitated at the door. "You think she'll ever talk to me again?" I thought about Elena, about the years of silence between us that had only been broken by crisis, about the sister I'd lost long before that plane took off. "I don't know," I said honestly. "But I think you'll be okay, even if she doesn't." She nodded once, understanding in her eyes that went beyond her years. Then she left. I watched her walk across the tarmac toward the shuttle van, shoulders back, head high, already carrying herself like a pilot. Maybe the Hernandez name could mean something different now. Not power or money or corporate boards, but courage, service, the willingness to step up when it matters. Elena had tried to erase me from the family legacy. Instead, I'd rewritten what that legacy meant. That night, I walked the airstrip alone again. Clear sky above. Stars stretched over the desert like old wounds that had stopped bleeding. I didn't think much about the plane anymore. Not the explosion, not the pressure drop, not even the landing, but sometimes, just sometimes, I thought about the moment right after, when no one clapped and no one panicked and no one said a word. That impossible quiet. That was the moment I knew I had taken back everything they tried to steal from me. Not by fighting louder, by flying higher. I pulled Dad's challenge coin from my pocket, turned it over in my hand. The metal was worn smooth from years of him carrying it. On one side, the insignia from his squadron. On the other, a simple inscription. "Courage is not the absence of fear." He never finished that quote for me. Never told me what came after, but I understood it now. Courage is not the absence of fear. It's the decision to act despite it. He knew. When he gave me that coin, when he left me that photo by the fighter jet, he knew. He knew Elena would try to erase me, knew the will was compromised. But he also knew I had something she didn't. The strength to stand alone, the skill to save lives, the integrity to do the right thing even when it cost me everything. That coin wasn't just a memento. It was a message. A reminder that legacy isn't about money or estates or who gets written into a will. It's about what you do when everything's falling apart and everyone's watching. It's about the person you choose to be when the easy choice is to do nothing. I closed my fist around the coin and looked up at the stars. Somewhere up there, maybe Dad was watching, maybe Mom too. Maybe they were proud of the choice I'd made, or maybe it didn't matter what they thought anymore, because I was proud of me. And that was enough. There's a kind of revenge that doesn't need an audience. It's not about taking someone down. It's about rising quietly while they watch, and realizing you no longer care if they do. For me, it wasn't about proving Elena wrong. It was about proving to myself that I was never broken, never small, never just a toy soldier. In the end, I didn't destroy my sister. I outgrew her. That's the thing with family revenge stories. The real power isn't in the fight. It's in the freedom that comes after. 6 months later, I got an email. No subject line. Just a message from an address I almost didn't recognize. It was from Elena. Nancy, I've been in therapy. Court-ordered at first, but I kept going after the requirement ended. My therapist says I need to take accountability for my actions. So here it is. I was jealous of you, always. From the time we were kids. You had something I could never buy or manipulate or steal. People genuinely liked you, respected you, not because of what you had, but because of who you were. I spent my whole life trying to prove I was better than you by any metric I could control. Money, status, Dad's approval. And when none of it worked, when you just kept being you, I tried to erase you instead. The plane landing went viral for a reason, because what you did was extraordinary. And I mocked you for it because I knew, deep down, that I would have frozen. That I don't have whatever it is that makes someone run toward danger instead of away from it. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that Morgan talks about you constantly, about the Institute, about how you're changing her life. And I'm grateful that she has you, that she gets to be the Hernandez I never was. Elena, I read it twice, then closed the laptop. Forgiveness wasn't mine to give, not yet, maybe not ever, but understanding that I could manage. Elena had spent her whole life fighting a war I didn't even know we were in. And she'd lost. Not because I beat her, but because she'd been fighting the wrong battle all along. I wasn't her enemy. I never was. I was just the mirror that reflected everything she was afraid to see in herself. And maybe, one day, she'd learn what I already knew. That the only person you really need to prove yourself to is the one staring back at you in that mirror. Until then, I had planes to fly and pilots to train. And that was more than enough. If you made it this far, thanks for reading. If you enjoy family revenge stories, real-life inspired revenge stories, or dramatic tales of power, pride, and redemption, make sure to subscribe and drop a comment below. I'd love to hear what you'd do if someone like Elena tried to erase you. Let's talk family loyalty and that sweet, quiet revenge.